The dust settled slowly over the town of Redemption Springs, coating everything in a fine layer of Texas earth. Sarah Calloway stood at the edge of the saloon's back porch, her fingers gripping the weathered railing until her knuckles turned white. The sun was setting behind the distant mesas, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, but she barely noticed. Her mind was somewhere else entirely, trapped in memories she couldn't escape no matter how hard she tried. She had arrived in Redemption Springs 3 months ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a past she desperately wanted to forget. The town had taken her in without asking questions, which was the way of things out here. Everyone had something they were running from. The saloon owner, a gruff but kind-hearted woman named Martha, had given her work washing dishes and helping in the kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, and that was more than Sarah had known in years. The sound of boots on wood made her turn. James McCready stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, his dark eyes studying her with concern that made her chest tighten. He was a rancher who owned a spread about 5 miles outside of town, a man known for his fairness and his quiet strength. He'd been coming into the saloon for weeks now, always finding some excuse to talk to her, always treating her like she was someone worth knowing. "You all right, Sarah?" His voice was low and gentle, the kind of voice that made her want to believe in good things again. She turned away quickly, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm fine, Mr. McCready. Just needed some air." He stepped out onto the porch, keeping a respectful distance. "You've been crying." "It's nothing." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. "Don't seem like nothing." He moved closer, but not close enough to crowd her. That was something she appreciated about James. He never pushed, never demanded. He just waited, patient as the earth itself. "Want to talk about it?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't want to hear about my troubles. Trust me on that." "I wouldn't have asked if I didn't want to know." She looked at him, then really looked at him. He was 32, about 6 years older than she was, with sun, weathered skin and hands that showed a lifetime of hard work. There was something solid about him, something dependable. It scared her more than she cared to admit. People like James McCready didn't waste their time on people like her. "I saw them today," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "My husband's brothers. They were riding through town." James's jaw tightened. "Did they see you?" "I don't think so. I hid in the stockroom until they left." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "I thought I was far enough away. I thought maybe they'd stopped looking. How long you been running?" 2 years. Maybe a bit more. Time gets fuzzy when you're always moving. James set his hat down on the railing and leaned against the post, giving her his full attention. "Your husband. Is he looking for you too?" Sarah's throat tightened. "He's dead. Been dead for 3 years now." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." The words came out harsher than she intended. "He wasn't a good man, Mr. McCready. He hurt me bad. And when I finally worked up the courage to leave, he came after me. We struggled and he fell. Hit his head on the fireplace stone. It was an accident, but his brothers, they blamed me. Said I murdered him. They've been hunting me ever since." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Sarah waited for James to make an excuse and leave, to decide she was too much trouble, too broken, too stained by her past. That's what people did when they learned the truth about her. They saw her differently, saw her as something damaged and dangerous. But James didn't move. He just nodded slowly, processing what she'd told him. "That's a heavy burden to carry alone. I deserve it." The words spilled out before she could stop them, years of guilt and shame rising up like bile. "I should have been stronger. Should have left sooner. Should have found another way." "Sarah, look at me." She couldn't. She stared at her feet instead, at the worn boards of the porch, at anything but his face. "Please." Something in his voice made her lift her head. His eyes were full of something she didn't recognize at first, something she'd forgotten existed. Compassion, understanding, something that looked almost like tenderness. "None of that was your fault," he said. "Man who hurts a woman ain't a man at all. You did what you had to do to survive. That's nothing to be ashamed of." Tears streamed down her face now, hot and unstoppable. "You don't understand. I'm not worth your kindness, Mr. McCready. I'm not worth anyone's kindness. I'm broken. I'm ruined. You're standing right here in front of me," he interrupted gently. "You're alive. You're working. You're trying to build something new. That takes more courage than most people ever have to muster. But I'm not." She struggled to find the words to make him understand. "I'm not worth loving. The whisper hung in the air between them, heavy with all the pain she'd been carrying. James stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that she could smell the honest scent of leather and sage on his clothes. "Then I'll love you until you believe you are." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "What? You heard me." His voice was steady, certain, like a promise carved in stone. "I don't care what happened before. I don't care what you think you are or aren't worth. I see you, Sarah. I see how hard you work. I see how kind you are to the children who come into the saloon with their parents. I see how you saved your wages to buy medicine for old Tom when he was sick, even though you barely had enough to feed yourself. I see who you really are, and I'm telling you right now, I'll love you until you believe you're worth it." "You can't mean that." Her voice shook. "I've never meant anything more in my life. You don't even know me. Then let me get to know you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who wasn't afraid of hard work. "Let me prove to you that you're worth more than what that man and his brothers told you. Let me show you what it's like to be cared for the way you deserve." Sarah wanted to run. Every instinct she'd developed over the past 2 years screamed at her to pull away, to protect herself, to not let anyone get close enough to hurt her again. But something in James's eyes held her there, something that felt like hope, fragile and terrifying and beautiful all at once. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to trust again. I don't know how to let someone in. We'll figure it out together." He squeezed her hand gently. "One day at a time. One step at a time. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. I'm patient, and I'm stubborn as an old mule when I want something. And I want to be there for you, if you'll let me." The weeks that followed were a strange kind of education. James came into town 3 times a week, always finding reasons to see her. He brought her wildflowers he'd picked on the ride in. He fixed the loose board on the saloon's back steps without being asked. He sat with her during her breaks and talked about his ranch, about his dreams of building it into something that would last, about the horses he was training and the cattle he was raising. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give. Some days, she could barely look at him. Other days, she found herself laughing at his stories, feeling something loosen in her chest that had been tight for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. Martha noticed, of course. "That McCready boy's sweet on you," she said one evening while they were washing dishes. "I know." Sarah scrubbed a plate harder than necessary. "He's a good man, one of the best." "I know that too. So what's the problem?" Sarah set the plate down carefully. "What if his brothers find me? What if they hurt him because of me? I couldn't bear that, Martha. I've already ruined one man's life." "You didn't ruin anything, child. Your husband made his own choices, and they were evil choices. That's not on you." Martha dried her hands on her apron and put a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Sometimes, we have to let people love us even when we don't think we deserve it. Sometimes, that's the only way we learn that we were wrong about ourselves all along." That night, Sarah lay in her small room above the saloon and thought about Martha's words. She thought about James, about the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She thought about the life she'd been living, always running, always hiding, always convinced that she deserved nothing better than scraps and shadows. Maybe it was time to stop running. The decision terrified her, but the next day when James came to town, she met him outside the saloon before he could come in. "Would you like to go for a walk?" she asked, her heart hammering in her chest. His face lit up like sunrise. "I'd like that very much." They walked through town and out onto the dusty road that led toward his ranch. Sarah told him things she'd never told anyone. About her childhood on a failing farm in Kansas, about her parents who'd died when she was 16, about how she'd married William Calloway because she'd had nowhere else to go and he'd seemed kind at first. "It changed after we were married," she said, watching the horizon. "Or maybe he was always that way and I just didn't see it." He drank. He got angry. He hit me. I kept thinking I could fix it, that if I was just better, quieter, more obedient, he'd stop. But it only got worse. James listened without interrupting, his presence steady beside her. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. I needed you to know. I needed you to understand what you're getting into if you really mean what you said." "I meant every word." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, I'm not him. I will never be him. I will never raise my hand to you. I will never make you feel small or worthless or afraid. I swear that to you on everything I hold sacred." She looked up at him, this man who was offering her something she'd thought was lost to her forever. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it." He reached out and gently cupped her face with one hand, his touch feather light, giving her every opportunity to pull away. "Take all the time you need. I meant what I said, I'm patient." Sarah closed her eyes and leaned into his touch, just for a moment. It felt like coming home. The summer passed in a slow, sweet progression. James courted her properly, with a patience that sometimes made her want to cry. He took her riding on gentle horses from his ranch. He taught her to rope a fence post, laughing with her when she missed again and again. He invited her to Sunday dinners, where his ranch hands treated her with respect and kindness that felt almost foreign. Sarah found herself changing. The frightened, haunted look gradually faded from her eyes. She smiled more. She slept better. The constant vigilance that had defined her life for so long began to ease, replaced by something that felt dangerously like peace. She started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. She could have happiness. She could have love. Then August came hot and dry, and with it came William's brothers. Sarah was hanging laundry behind the saloon when she saw them riding down the main street. There were 3 of them, hard men with cold eyes and guns on their hips. Robert, the oldest, was in the lead. She recognized them instantly, and her blood turned to ice. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran inside. "Martha! They're here!" Martha took one look at her face and understood. "Go upstairs. Lock your door. I'll handle this. They'll hurt you if you get in their way. Let them try." Martha's face was set like stone. "This is my establishment, and I decide who's welcome here. Now go." Sarah fled upstairs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She locked herself in her room and pressed her ear against the door, trying to hear what was happening below. She heard boots on the stairs, heard Robert's voice, loud and demanding. "We know she's here! Sarah Calloway! Come out, you murdering witch!" Martha's voice firm and unyielding. "There's no one here by that name. You boys need to leave." "The hell we will. We've been tracking her for 2 years. Someone saw her here. Now you can give her up peaceful, or we can tear this place apart." Sarah's hands shook as she backed away from the door. This was it. This was what she'd been dreading. They'd found her, and now everyone she cared about would pay the price. Martha would lose her saloon. The townspeople who'd been kind to her would be caught in the crossfire. And James. Oh, James. As if summoned by her thoughts, she heard his voice ring out from somewhere downstairs. "That's enough. No, 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 no." She fumbled with the lock on her door, desperate to get downstairs, to stop him from getting involved, to keep him safe even if it meant giving herself up. "Who the hell are you?" Robert demanded. "Name's James McCready. I own the Circle M ranch outside of town, and I'm telling you to leave this establishment and this town. Now, this ain't your business, rancher. You made it my business when you threatened these good people." Sarah finally got her door open and rushed downstairs. The saloon had gone silent. Every patron was watching the confrontation. Robert and his brothers stood in the center of the room, hands hovering near their guns. James stood between them and the stairs, his stance relaxed but ready, his eyes hard as flint. "James, don't," Sarah said from the stairway. "Please, I'll go with them. Just don't get hurt because of me." James's eyes flicked to her briefly, and something fierce and protective flashed across his face. "You're not going anywhere with these men, Sarah. You got no say in it," Robert snarled. "She murdered our brother. She's coming with us to face justice." "Justice?" James's voice was cold. "Is that what you call it when 3 armed men hunt down a woman who was defending herself from a man who beat her?" "She's a liar!" "William, never. I've talked to people who knew your brother," James interrupted. "Turns out he had a reputation in Kansas. Turns out there was another woman before Sarah, one who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Turns out your whole family has a history of treating women like property. So don't talk to me about justice when you wouldn't know it if it bit you." The room was so quiet you could hear the dust settling. Robert's face turned purple with rage. "You calling us liars? I'm calling you cowards who terrorize women because it makes you feel strong." James took a step forward, and despite being outnumbered, he looked like the most dangerous man in the room. "And I'm telling you to leave. Not just the saloon, the town, the territory. Because Sarah Calloway is under my protection now. And if you want to get to her, you're going to have to go through me." "James." "No," Sarah started, but Martha put a hand on her arm. Let him finish, the older woman murmured. Robert laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You think you can take all three of us? I don't think I'll have to. James gestured around the room. See, thing is, people around here like Sarah. They've seen how hard she works, they've seen her kindness, and they don't take kindly to bullies. As if on cue, several men in the saloon stood up, their hands moving to their own weapons. The blacksmith, the general store owner, even old Tom, who Sarah had helped when he was sick. They formed a loose semicircle around James, their message clear. So you've got a choice, James continued. You can leave peacefully, or you can face the whole town. Your call. The brothers looked around, realizing suddenly that they were badly outnumbered. Robert's hand twitched toward his gun, but his younger brother, Daniel, grabbed his arm. It ain't worth it, Rob. Let's go. The hell it is, she murmured. William was mean as a snake, and you know it, Daniel said quietly. He put Mama in the ground early with his temper. He drove Pi to drink, and he nearly killed his first wife before she ran off. Maybe it's time we let this go. For a long moment, Robert stood there, fury and frustration warring across his face. Then he spat on the floor and jabbed a finger at Sarah. This ain't over? Yeah, it is, James said firmly. You come back here, and it won't end well for you. That's a promise. The Calloway brothers left, their boots heavy on the wooden floor. The whole town seemed to hold its breath until they rode out, heading north. Only when they disappeared into the distance did Sarah allow herself to sink down onto the stairs, her legs unable to hold her anymore. James was at her side in an instant, kneeling on the step below her. Are you all right? She stared at him. At this man who'd just faced down 3 armed killers for her, this man who'd rallied an entire town to protect her. You could have been killed. Wasn't going to let them hurt you. Why? The word broke on a sob. Why would you risk your life for someone like me? He took her hands in his, and his voice was gentle but utterly certain. Because I love you, Sarah Calloway. Because you're brave and strong and worthy of protection. Because every person in this town who stood up just now did it, because they see what I see. You're not what those men said you are. You're not defined by what happened to you. You're defined by what you've done since. The way you've rebuilt your life. The way you've shown kindness even when you had nothing. The way you've survived when it would have been easier to give up. Tears poured down her face, but for the first time in years they weren't tears of pain. I was so scared. I've been scared for so long. I know. But you don't have to be scared anymore. He reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. I meant what I said that night on the porch. I'll love you until you believe you're worth it. However long that takes. Sarah looked around the saloon at all the faces looking back at her with warmth and acceptance. She looked at Martha, who was smiling through tears of her own. She looked at the men who'd stood up to protect her, who'd risked themselves for someone they barely knew. And she looked at James, at this good man who'd somehow seen past all her damage to the person she'd forgotten she could be. I'm starting to believe it, she whispered. His smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Then I'll keep on loving you until you believe it all the way through. Until you can't remember a time when you doubted it. Until it's as natural to you as breathing. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. That might take a while. I've got time. The next few months transformed Sarah in ways she couldn't have imagined. With the threat of William's brothers gone, she began to truly settle into life in Redemption Springs. James courted her openly now, and no one in town batted an eye. If anything, people seemed pleased, as if they'd been waiting for the two of them to figure out what everyone else had already seen. He proposed on a cool October evening, down by the creek that ran through his property. The cottonwoods were turning gold, and the water reflected the sunset like liquid fire. He didn't have a fancy ring, just a simple band he'd commissioned from the blacksmith. But when he asked her to be his wife, his voice shaking slightly with hope and nervousness, Sarah didn't hesitate. Yes, she said, and then again stronger, yes. They were married in November, in a small ceremony at the church with the whole town in attendance. Martha cried openly. Old Tom played fiddle at the reception. The blacksmith gave them a handmade weather vane for their home. It felt like being welcomed into a family Sarah had never known she could have. The first few months of marriage were an adjustment. Sarah still had nightmares sometimes, waking in a panic until she felt James's solid presence beside her, his voice murmuring comfort in the darkness. There were days when she flinched at sudden movements, when old fears rose up unbidden, But James was patient, always patient, giving her space when she needed it and reassurance when she asked for it. Slowly, steadily, she healed. The ranch became home. She learned to ride well enough to help with the cattle. She planted a garden that thrived under her care. She started teaching the children in town to read on Sunday afternoons, discovering a talent for instruction she'd never known she had. One evening in spring, almost a year after they'd married, Sarah stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky. James came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest.
"What are you thinking about?"
he asked. She leaned into him, marveling at how safe she felt, how completely unthreatened. "I was thinking about something you said once, about loving me until I believed I was worth it. I remember. I believe it now." She turned in his arms to face him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. "I believe I'm worth loving. I believe I deserve to be happy. I believe I deserve you." His eyes shone with emotion. "Sarah, let me finish." She smiled up at him. This man who'd changed her life simply by refusing to give up on her. "I spent so long thinking I was broken, that I was defined by what happened to me, by what I'd survived. But you showed me something different. You showed me that survival isn't just enduring. It's choosing to keep going. It's choosing to hope again. It's choosing to open your heart even when you're terrified it'll get broken again." "You did all that yourself?" James said softly. "I just stood beside you while you figured it out. You did more than that. You gave me a reason to try. You gave me a reason to believe I could be more than my past." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him gently. "Thank you. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. For being patient when I needed to heal. You don't have to thank me for loving you. It's the easiest thing I've ever done." They stood there as the sun sank below the horizon, wrapped in each other's arms. Two people who'd found in each other something rare and precious. Sarah thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago, running scared and convinced she deserved nothing but pain. She thought about how far she'd come, how much she'd grown. The past would always be part of her story, but it didn't own her anymore. She'd survived. She'd healed. She'd learned to love and be loved, and that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all. Not erasing what had happened, but refusing to let it define her future. Building something beautiful from the ashes of what had been destroyed, finding the courage to believe that she deserved more than suffering, more than fear, more than just survival. She deserved joy. She deserved peace. She deserved love. And finally, after all this time, she believed it was true. The stars came out one by one, spreading across the wide Texas sky like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its voice carrying across the prairie. The night breeze carried the scent of sage and possibility. James tightened his arms around her, and Sarah closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of hope. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it steal the future. Not being unbroken, but being brave enough to trust someone with your brokenness. "I love you," she whispered into the gathering darkness. "I love you too," James murmured back. "Always have. Always will." And standing there on the porch of their home, surrounded by land they'd worked together and dreams they'd build together, Sarah Calloway finally understood what it meant to be free. Free from fear, free from shame. Free from the belief that she was anything less than worthy of every good thing this life had to offer. She'd whispered once that she wasn't worth loving, and he'd replied that he'd love her until she believed she was. He'd kept his promise, but more than that, he'd given her the space and the safety to discover it for herself. The greatest gift of all. Not just being loved, but learning to accept that love, to believe in it, to know deep in her bones that she deserved it. The future stretched out before them, uncertain as any future must be, but full of promise. There would be hard days ahead. There would be challenges to face and obstacles to overcome. But they would face them together, and that made all the difference. Sarah had spent years running from her past. Now, finally, she was running toward her future. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't afraid of what she might find there.